Well, hello, everybody. Of course, it's me, Bigfoot, Michigan Rob, BMR, coming on today on a Friday. Actually, I before I get started, I hope everybody had just a great Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody. Um, in case you missed it, maybe you did, maybe you didn't, or maybe you noticed, I did not do a brunch with Bigfoot Rob show this past Thursday because well, as a lot of you know that follow me, been following the channel, my mom has been sick, and since Thanksgiving she had pneumonia, and then last week she had caught COVID, and so we're all like, how in the hell did Ma get COVID? So good old BMR, right? Went down, and for shits and giggles, I went and got a COVID test, and I had COVID. Yeah. So Thursday, this past Thursday, when I do the brunch show, it was right around time to get my mom because she's good to go from the hospital. My mom is now home, COVID free. And before I had to go pick her up, they would not let me do anything. They wouldn't let me visit her. They wouldn't let me do anything. She forgot some things at the house, so I had to have other people send my mom clothes at the hospital, this, that, and the other. And I bought her a charger online because her phone went out of juice, and it was kind of a nightmare. So I got the rapid test that Thursday because they would not let me get her. And well, I don't have it anymore. I know, because we wondered, how did mom get COVID, man? She hasn't gone anywhere with pneumonia. And I guess I picked it up somewhere, but now I am free of that. And, and as a lot of you that have been watching the channel know, I've been under the weather too since Thanksgiving. I probably had COVID, man, for a while, not knowing it. I mean, it wasn't big, but I was always lethargic and tired. And, I did all my shows, but boy, it was a chore to get through them. But I do these because I love doing them, obviously, and I love you guys as well. So I try to do shows for you. So I thought today would be a cool show. And there's a reason why I'm doing this today is because of the audience, right? And I did, however, if you guys missed I did do a show New Year's Day live with Dave Scott from Spaced Out Radio. I got to tell you, you guys, Dave Scott's a friend of mine, Spaced Out Radio. You can find him on YouTube. Go check him out because we did a story. It was a great show for one. And number two, he introduced Flight 21 that he talked about on my show on New Year's Day. And I was privileged enough to be the first guy to get his story. It's about It's about a plane wreck in British Columbia that went down, and he investigated this, and there was all sorts of paranormal activity, and there was a Bigfoot in the area. And it was an incredible story. That was a favorite show of mine, and I'm not saying that because all my shows I love, but Dave's a friend of mine, and his story, go check it out after this show or whenever you have an opportunity. It was on New Year's Day. It was live. BMR, Krista, and Dave Scott from Space Out Radio. If this is your first time here, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube. Please subscribe to Texas Front Porch on YouTube, the Blondes and the Booze Paranormal Podcast on YouTube, Paranormal Paul on YouTube, Donnie Cho Says Stuff on YouTube, Monica Rollins, our Paranormal World, found on YouTube. Please, everybody, hit that like button. The like button does help promote, our YouTube channel. And I'm 50 subscribers away, everybody, from 5,000. Please, I want to hit that in January. My goal was to hit it on Christmas Day. I knew it was a lofty goal. Didn't quite get there. I'm about 50 away. So if you are new, please subscribe. Tell your friends, your family, whoever's into these types of subjects. So thank you ever so much for that. Hey, Brett, Paranormal Portal. Good to see you, brother. Good to see everybody in the chat room. While I'm at it, I have got no co-host. I'm going to tell you the Dogman Island REDUX. I did this story 2 years ago on a video. It's an epic encounter story. Before I get into it, I want to give some shout outs in the chat room real quick. Mickey G, Lil Patty, scrolling down, Diane Boss, Keith from Michigan, Moon at Noon, hi Moon at Noon, Kelly Lewis, hi Kelly. Let's see who else. Scrolling down. A lot of the same people. There's 42 of you in here. I can't see you all. Denise, Corey Cole, Paranormal Paul. Ooh, who else? If I missed you, I'm sorry. Tammy. Hi, Tammy. How are you? Blah, blah, blah. Roger Blair. Hi, Roger. How are you? Danny Staten. Hello, Danny. Of course, I think I said Mickey G. You're all not Mark Beasel. Hi, Mark. How are you? Good to see you. I'm blowing through this. There's 40 of you. I know I haven't said 40 people's names. Blah, 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 blah. Well, anyways. Whoa, Keith, thank you so much, brother. Keith from Michigan, who's going to be a guest on my show in January. He's got some fabulous encounter stories. We're going to get into that in January. Thank you so much for Keith. I appreciate you. Poncho, Zorch, Nathan from the Quantum Show. Isaac Areola. Hello, Isaac. Good to see you. Scrolling down. Nathan. Wow, thank you so much, Nathan from the Quantum Show. The super chat obviously is open, not expected, everybody, but appreciated. You could also become a BMR pirate. Mateys, join today, join the many, join the few, depending on your point of view. Thank you ever so much for that. If I missed you, I'm sorry. I did not rip off 42 people. Hi, Gina. If I didn't say your name, I love you just the same. Thank you so much for coming on in. And thanks to start this January 3rd off with the awesome super chats. And so before I get started, a couple other brief things. I'm going to go over this Dogman Island because I did this 2 years ago, and it's an epic story, an epic true encounter story. I interviewed this guy. He sent me an email on this, and I did this on a video not too long ago. And you can also find this story in my first book, Bigfoot Mr. Rob Presents True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1. And with that being said, while I'm at it, here we go. But yes, of course, Bigfoot Mission represents True Cryptid Encounters, Book 1, Book 2, both found on Amazon. I want to thank everybody that bought it over the holidays and throughout the last year and 6 months. Book 1's been out a year and 4 months. The other one's been out for about 5 months, I think now. Thank you. Please leave a review if you bought it because, that does help promote sales. And really briefly, before I do move on with the awesome Dogman Island Redux here, we've got a conference going on September 19th and 20th, Crossing Realms Conference, UFOs, Paranormal, and Cryptids. That takes place in Richmond, Missouri. The link is provided in my profile page on all of our channels. The people that I aforementioned earlier, it's there for you. And I got to tell you guys, this lineup keeps growing. And I must say that here's our lineup. Here's just our lineup. Not to mention, I will be there. The Blondes and Booze will be there. Tex is the master of ceremonies. Donnie Cho will be there. Paranormal Paul will be there. Who else? Daniel Diva will be there. And if I go over this list here, our speakers are Josh Hurd, Heather Mosier from Small Town Monsters, Frankie and Dan from Haunted Garage, who are bringing a haunted car. Tex is the master of ceremonies. Greg Ogles, speaker, filmmaker. William Lunsford, talking about the Falk Monster. Ronald Murphy, Lady Ann Celine, Dr. Dean Bertram, special guests, and this is getting a little bit bigger. Oh, and by the way, we're adding another surprise speaker. I have to confirm that he's speaking with us, a great friend of mine, and a lot of us on the channel as well will be there. I don't know that I can announce it now, but as I said, this is growing. Our special guest, of course, Brent Thomas from the Paranormal Portal, who is also a featured co-host with me on Thursdays when he can make it. Ken Gerhard will be there, and Dana Stricker will be there. So we got a fantastic lineup, everybody. It's just a fantastic lineup. I want to thank all of you for coming on in, spending the time today. I'm kind of making this up as my cell phone is just going off. It's Denise. I see now while I was gone. Denise, thank you so much for your awesome super chat. Great way to start the show with your love and support from the three folks that already, super chatted me up. And I do appreciate it. That, again, not expected, but always greatly appreciated. I was happy mom's out of the hospital and doing okay. I'm glad I'm done with this dumb, ridiculous virus, whatever the hell you want to call it. So I'm going to move on. And so I'm going to get back. So I got to tell you guys, Dogman Island, I put out 2 years ago on a video, right? And as most of you know, I do a true cryptid encounter stories once a week from folks that send in emails. And I had gotten this email 2 years ago from this man who lives in Michigan. And I read through the email and I said, I got to call this guy. I got to call this guy. I called him up. I spoke with him several times on the phone, and I just compiled his story. I put it together the best I could with his email that he sent me and what he verbalized to me on the telephone. And so I said, hey, man, I'm going to do a book. My first book I was just starting to write. And he said, yeah, Rob, put it in your book. And I said, well, you know what I'm also going to do is make a video, if you don't mind, and tell the story. And I did, and you guys loved it. And then I've been getting a lot of emails and comments, and they said, hey, Rob, Dogman Island, great story. Now, I personally think it's an epic story. I believe this story, and it's close to my home. And tonight, I'm going to present that again because a lot of you, especially a lot of the new subscribers, had wanted me to retell it on a show, maybe a live show. And it's 2 years old, but I got to tell you, I've told my Bigfoot encounter ad nauseum many times. I don't know why my phone is blowing up. Every time I put on a show, you guys, my phone blows up. My phone just blows up, and I don't know who it is or what it is. Okay, whatever. It's irregardless. I'm moving on. So yeah, so I'm going to do this today. Typically, when I tell a story, everybody, though, as most of you know, before a show, if I'm doing a show, I'll read the story over, the encounter story, and I do it all from memory. BMR prides himself in telling a story from memory. But I've also become pretty good at reading a story where you guys don't know if I'm reading it or doing it from memory. And the only time I read these, though, is because if there's a lot of details. Now, as good as my memory is that I proclaim, I miss out on a lot of the details that encapsulate the story. And this, I'm doing both stories. I'm doing the original and the follow-up, which I know a lot of you have not heard with this guy. And I've been in contact with him, and he's not going to ever be on the show because he's older now. He's a much older man now, okay? And he's very private. He doesn't even tell me what his profession is because it just takes place in Groseal, Michigan. And if you live on Groseal, you're rich. You're a professional. You're a business owner, and you'll find out when I tell this story. He did not want to lose any of his. I got to throw that phone away. It's bugging me. It's going off and off. Sorry about that. So yeah, so you're gonna understand it. So I'm gonna read it, but I'm pretty good at reading. I'm just good at it, I guess, and I'm not bragging. So I'm gonna get on. Thanks everybody for coming on in. Thanks for the starts with the awesome super chats, and that's from Keith. It's from Nathan. It's from Denise. Thank you guys. Love you and appreciate you. So I'm gonna get on with this story. I'm gonna do part 1 first, and I'll give you my take, and then I'll do part 2 as well. I appreciate all of you for coming on in. Hit that like button, subscribe if you're new. I'm getting close to the 5,000. So I'm gonna get on with Dogman Island. And I'm gonna get on, kick back, enjoy it. Thank you to everybody for coming on in. It goes on to state with this story, and this is how it's kind of written in the book, but I'm going to redo it a little bit to be a little more animated. It's not to read it, right? But I'm going to read most of it. So this man bought a home in Groseal, Michigan, back in 1979, everybody, okay? It was a beautiful old New England style home sitting on East River Road in Groseal, Michigan. The woods surrounded both sides of the home, and he had a very beautiful 90-foot riverfront that led to a nice sandy beach. It was a vacation home when not on vacation, as he goes on and he proudly says. So, you guys, he's got a vacation home as his real home. Excuse me. This home was built during the days of Prohibition when bootlegging of booze was transported to and from Canada, utilizing the Detroit River. East River Road, again, the road that he lived on, was nothing more than that as his address, as his home. In fact, his home was sitting right on the Detroit River. The street is on East River Road. It's on the river. And everybody, this is about a 40-minute ride for me. I've been on East River Road. I've been on Groseal. I've boated up and along the river in all these chains of islands, okay, which I'll get into as the story unfolds. This man sat on the man and wife, their home sat upon a hill. So from the top of their house, they'd have to walk down the hill to their beachfront. And at the base of the hill, it was covered with a bunch of wild vegetation, flowers, all sorts of shrubbery, the like. Very beautiful. He goes on to say that after 2 years of living at the residence, his wife, Sally, started to hear these muffled sounds of howling, okay? Like perhaps it's a dog. At this point in time, everybody, the thought of a wolf did not even cross their minds, okay? I'm still under the weather a little bit. I'm still coughing. I apologize. I apologize. But here's the thing about Groseal, everybody. There's no wolves on Groseal. In fact, to find wolves here in my state, you pretty much got to go way north, and in fact, into the UP. Nothing in southern Michigan. Groseal is in southern Michigan. These howls would be heard frequently, almost every other day. Yet, the husband and wife, they could not place the location where these howls came from. In fact, sometimes everybody, the howls seem like they came from the basement, and to be more precise, from inside of their wine cellar. Now, I'm going to go back and say this is a wealthy family. If you live on Groseal, you're wealthy. Could I buy a home there? Well, I could. I'm not wealthy, but there are other. You can get homes for. Thank you, Nathan, for becoming a new member or a new pirate. Nathan from the Quantum Show. And I apologize again, man. I'm still queasy. But you could pick up a house for 100 grand, 200 grand. But in between all these homes, though, the majority are there $1 million or above, you guys. Maybe 500,000. So again, a wealthy family. I don't know what he does. He did not tell me that because he didn't want to put his business. I'm assuming this guy's a doctor or a lawyer. Okay. He did not want to feel ridiculous because as this story goes on, you're going to, you're going to feel why you wouldn't want to tell anybody, to be honest. So anyway, moving on. One night now, as this house starts up again, the man goes to the basement. He goes to inside his basement, and he walked over to the wine cellar. And as soon as he opens the door to the wine cellar, these howls, they stop. So the howls stop, and this is kind of where he was getting these sounds from. He's thinking to himself, what's going on? He knows for a fact there's not an animal in his house. There's not a dog. There's not a wolf. But he started getting a chills running through this guy's body. But he kind of brushes it off, and perhaps that his wife and himself were hearing things. Okay. But the wife and the husband, they're both hearing these howling sounds from inside the house and outside the house. Several weeks go by without a sound. And to be honest, his wife, whose name was Sally, was relieved. And so was the husband. Okay. It's funny, though. I'm not going to tell you the husband's name yet because I'm telling the story how it was sent to me. Then he forgot to tell me his name. He does that in part 2. And I forgot his name already. But anyway, late one evening around 6 o'clock, Sally and he went down to the base of the hill leading to the beach to relax and look out at all the freighters that was crossing past their home. Oh, okay. Let me see here. Blah blah blah. Okay, sorry, I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought. So they've seen these freighters. They go out there at the base of the hill. They're on a sandy beach and are watching the freighters. He goes on and said that Sally and himself both love watching these huge vessels and other boats pass by. It was a very serene and relaxing experience that they always love spending hours admiring. However, everybody, on this particular night, the howls now they once again started up. So everybody painting the picture, they're on their beach looking at the freighters, these howls start up. They were both sitting on the water's edge, and now they hear these howls in back of them. They're both startled. They both got up from their lounge chairs and started to walk towards the howls in back of them, towards their house. The closer that this family or this married couple got to the base of the hill, the louder and louder the howls became. The howls grew more ferocious and threatening the closer they got upon their hill. Yet, there's not an animal and there's not a dog in sight. Upon reaching the base of the hill, these howls appeared to come from inside of the hill. So, as I said, their home is perched upon this hill. They're at the waterfront on the beach. Howls are in back of them, and they start walking up their hill toward their home. And it sounds like the howls are emanating from inside the hill. They're perplexed. They're scared. Sally, and I'm just going to call it Sally and the husband walk along the hill. The howls rang out into the night, and they both were stunned and had no explanation. So these howls are ongoing now. All of a sudden, they had the thought that perhaps their hill was haunted. It started to manifest and take over their thoughts. They both believe this is impossible. They both agreed. They never really believed in ghosts or the paranormal. Eventually, the howls finally stopped, and Sally and the husband, they went in, they made dinner, and spent the entire night pondering as to what they were experiencing. That night, the wife and the husband, they didn't get much sleep. They wanted to get to the bottom of this mystery. They came to the agreement that they would play investigators and decide to start Start off with the original source of the sound. So these folks they're going to investigate this. So they started from the wine cellar. Because when they went into the basement of this home, that's where the howls were most emphatic, from inside of the wine cellar. Inside the wine cellar, the husband, I'm going to call him Rick because I forgot his name for right now because I forgot the name. I'm not going to scroll through all this, but I'm going to say Rick stands in the center of the wine cellar, okay? And on two sides of the walls, he had racks of wine. On the far back wall, he also had a back of wine. So in this wine cellar, on the left wall and on the right wall in the back, racks of wine. So Rick picks up, for whatever the reason is, he picks up his broomstick. He flips it around and starts to use the end of the handle and start to hit against the side of the walls. Okay. Both of the sides of the walls appeared to be solid until he reached the very back wall. Thank you, James. Appreciate that so much, brother. To his surprise, the wall rang hollow. It echoed, and he realized the back of the wall was not solid at all. Sally and Rick began to remove all the bottles of wine and started to take down the wine racks. Rick started to hit the wall more and more with his hammer and realized that he needed to take down the wall. He goes on to say he cannot believe what he's about to do, so he goes back, took a hammer, and started to pound into the wall. The wife, Sally's staring at Rick like he's crazy. However, when he started pounding with the hammer, it went straight through the wall, creating a very sizable hole. He went to look through the hole, and to his amazement, there appeared to be a tunnel or corridor on the other side. Rick proceeds to tear down the wall, and then as he's looking through, he estimates there lays a tunnel. Tears this wall down, everybody. Now there's a tunnel in his home in the back of his wine cellar. He is shocked. Now, before I move on, what I do know about Grozil, I know about all the bootlegging. I know that imported of illegal booze during Prohibition was run across Detroit to Canada, and a lot of it went over the Detroit River. Okay, so this is nothing uncommon, and in fact, a lot of homes in Grozil, Michigan, are known to have had tunnels in their houses. He goes on to say that the tunnel was no more than 4 feet wide by 5 feet tall. Both Sally and Rick were both over 5 feet tall. They had to duck down as they entered this strange finding. So you guys, Sally and Rick are now entering this tunnel from inside the cellar. It was dark and musty. And after about 10 feet in, Rick decides, well, it's too dark now, so he circles back to get a flashlight. They both continue on. Sally and Rick are now both armed with flashlights. Sally's behind him, lighting the pathway ahead for him, while Rick scans the ground in front of himself. They walk perhaps 90 feet or so when Rick starts to notice a scent of oversized dog-like or wolf-like prints in this tunnel on the ground. And now when he says oversized, they were double the size of any dog prints he had ever seen. The prints were sporadic. They started up and they stopped. They started, they stopped. Then, as they proceed through this tunnel, the top of the tunnel got taller, where Sally and himself could finally walk fully upright. And in fact, Rick goes on to say that he and Sally were both ready to turn back as their necks were getting tight and sore. But with the additional spacing between their heads and the top of the tunnel, they continue on. Now the track prints they pick up again. He actually had to take a double look at the prints of these oversized dog-like tracks that traveled as a set of 4. So it's like a quadruped, okay, everybody? And as he's continuing on, now they became bipedal. Or as he says, how shall I say, walking like a human. The tunnel now starts to smell. It was dank and it was musty. The walls of the tunnel, as well as the ground beneath them, began to get wet and muddy. Now their ears start to pop and ring. Their breathing their breathing now is very strainful or labored. Now they realize that the oxygen is diminishing. They both stop and realize that this tunnel had now been under the river. So everybody, to clarify, they're in their home, they're in their wine cellar, they knock down this wall, they find this tunnel, they're traversing down this tunnel, which is leading towards the back of the house, which is where the Detroit River lays. And now, as they not paying any attention, they realize that they now have traveled so far that they have to be under the river. And yes, I looked this up. There are tunnels that lead under the Detroit River to Canada. I've looked it up. In fact, here in Michigan, we have the Michigan and Canadian tunnel that's underground. So very hurriedly, Sally and Rick turn around and start to head back to their house. Upon reaching the home, Sally and Rick are now ecstatic about their finding. Which, I don't know if I'd be ecstatic. I mean, I find these wolf-like, dog-like prints in a tunnel in the back of my house that turn bipedal. They hear these howls. They have a tunnel that's obviously not on the plans of the home, undiscovered. I guess I don't know if I would use the word ecstatic, everybody, right? I don't know. Very intriguing for sure. So anyway, early in the afternoon, he gets out and he runs to the top of his deck at the rear of the home that peered out into the river. So again, you guys, this house is massive. Now he's on his deck of the house on the hill overlooking the Detroit River. Then he starts to kind of put 2 and 2 together. In the distance, maybe a quarter mile or so away, there's a chain of uninhabited islands that line up directly from the base of the home and square up directly from the approximate location of this tunnel. Of course, he's guessing, but he kind of is using he's eyeballing out everything, and it kind of lines up. He goes on to say that his very first thought was that their home and the tunnel had to be used for the bootlegging of the liquor to and from Detroit to Canada, which I mentioned earlier. He thinks, wow, what an ingenious idea. And then he goes back. He's all excited, him and his wife, because now they think that their home is now a part of history. Sally and Rick, without a doubt, need to investigate this further. They're thinking about, boy, let's move on. Let's move further. Upon going online, then now these guys, everybody, they're investigating. This went online, and they were looking up Grozeal, the island. And then they, again, like I mentioned earlier, they find that Grozeal was indeed used for bootlegging during Prohibition. Sometimes wood boats were used. And yes, some cases, elaborate tunnel systems were developed to move about the border back and forth, right, during the illegal days. So now he knows that other homes have these tunnels. He looked it up. I, in fact, myself personally looked it up and knew about this well before I heard the story anyway, right? But now they're going back to what are these dog-like tracks? What are these bipedal tracks? What is this howling of dogs or wolves going on? What's just going on here? That's the question. So now Sally and Rick decide that they now need to take a trip to the uncharted islands, the uninhabited chains of islands. Again, everybody, if I sound nasally, I'm still not over my, whatever the hell I got. I don't have the COVID no more. So if I sound nasally or scratchy, I apologize. Now, really briefly, though, I'm going to tell you guys about these uninhabited chains of islands. I, living in Michigan, have been to Groseal. Back in the day, when a few of my friends owned boats, I know exactly where all these islands are. I've been by them. A lot of them you can't get on because there's a lot of rocks. You just cannot get there. Okay, they're very tough to get to, but I know exactly what he's talking about. You guys can even Google it if you like on Google Earth, but they're there. I've seen them. There's a whole assortment of islands out in this area. So the next day, they set up, they get a date together. They get a date to go out and embark on this journey. So they go ahead and they load up their 28-foot Sea Ray boat and they went off. They stopped at the first island directly in front of where their home sat. In fact, when you look back, you have a perfect view of his home in the distance, right? So this man, Rick and Sally, they circle the island on their boat. He guesstimated that the island was as long as perhaps 3 football fields, which for those that don't follow football, that'd be 300 yards. Says that there's maybe another 100, he says it's maybe another 150 yards wide. So it's a very sizable island. And that kind of, and I'm thinking to myself, there's an island called Fox Island, which kind of is similar size that I've seen. But anyway, there's but and now so anyways, and there's also a bunch of other very smaller islands around here, right? And I'm familiar with a lot of them. There's a Sugar Island, there's a Grassy Island. So good old BMR knows this area, but they're not nearly as big as this other island. So he goes on to tell me that the only thing about now they want to get on this island, but he says the bad thing about this island is they can't find an area to dock the boat. They cannot pull up to the island because in the distance it gets covered with rock. So with a 28-foot boat, it's just too big to get up to the island. So what they have to do is they luckily on their 28-foot Sea Ray boat, they had a 2-man rubber boat with a small trolling motor on it. So they got that into the water and they motored ashore. So everybody, what they did, they docked their Sea Ray boat out. How far away, I don't know. It doesn't say that, but they're a distance away where they have to get their rubber boat. Now they're taking the rubber boat with the little trolling motor, which is small enough for them to propel themselves and ride over to now this island. Okay. Upon arriving at the shore, Sally, Rick, they get out of the boat and they proceed on to the island. I'm out watching the chat, everybody. Thanks to each and everybody for coming on in. I do appreciate you so much for coming on in today. I am BMR. Thank you so much. If you're new, please subscribe. Thank you. So they get up to this island. Now, everybody, this island is not developed, okay? It's covered in wild trees and other foliage. It's raw and is pretty wild and untamed. It's almost jungle-like. Upon getting onto the island, there's a lot of underdeveloped trails where they notice that wildlife appeared to travel through. But thinking ahead, good old Rick brought a machete along with him to help plow out a way, and cut through all the foliage. So he's carving away, cutting away with the machete with Sally behind him. And no less than 50 feet in, they get about 50 feet in, and they stumble upon the skull of a deer. However, he found it strange that there should not be any deer on the island. How do deer get on an island? He's thinking to himself. He was concerned about how a deer skull was present on the island. Really briefly, everybody, I know that there are deer in the woods of Groseal, and I don't know, so I'm ignorant to this fact. I do not know that they swim, if they could swim on an island. I mean, it's a long swim, and I kind of don't know myself why you would find a deer skull, okay, on this island. I just don't know. Anyway, he goes on to say, well, you know what, Rob? Nature finds a way. If an animal wants to get somewhere, they can find a way. So he kind of left it at that. They're hiking on this island for several hours. When Sally and Rick, guess what, everybody? They begin to hear those howls, much like the howls from their home. The difference is they're not the muffled howls that he heard from in the cellar. They were very distinctive. They were very clear. Rick goes on to say he made a mistake and did not bring a sidearm. He's a little bit scared now. He goes on to say that Sally's now mad at him. She now is getting very scared. Okay. The howls got closer, and now they can hear footfalls surrounding from all angles. Some of the footfalls sounded bipedal or four-legged, as he says, along with a mixture of the bipedal, right? So he's got all sorts of things running around now. Here's these howls. Now their fears heighten, okay? The fears are heightened. The howls stopped. The footfall fell silent. The island grew silent. No birds, nothing. Everything as calm as can be, deathly eerie. He says he could hear a pin drop. From their approximate location now, Sally and Rick, they're panning the woods from all directions. All directions, they're panning the woods on this island. Then after about 5 minutes, which to them seemed like an eternity, glowing red eyes emerge from the shadow of the woods. At first, Rick and Sally say that all they can see at first were the eyes. The eyes hovered about what is it here? The eyes hovered about 4 feet above the ground. Sally, to her left, sees another set of glowing red eyes. So now there are two sets of these creatures, or they say creature, but this time they don't know what it is. There's two sets of glowing red eyes. Then the one that they were looking at, or Sally was looking at, rose up at least another 4 feet and stepped forward. That was Rick. That's what Rick saw, because the one to Sally's left remained stable and lower to the ground. So this other creature, as they explain now, they're starting to use the word creature, little foreshadowing, right? It stepped forward out. It stepped forward, and when it came out of the brush, it's now on two legs. Rick says it was black. The eyes glowed red. This creature had pointed ears off of the side of his head, and it was an enormous head. A very enormous snout protruded out. He says it's almost double the length of any wolf or dog that he had ever seen. However, he says this was not a dog or a wolf. He goes on to say that nothing stands or walks on 2 feet, and nothing is at least 8 feet tall. He said it looked directly at him, and it looked directly at him. The one to Sally's left, everybody, it disappears, it vanishes, it takes off, whatever. But the one they're looking at stood tall, it stood muscular, it's intimidating. And then there's a voice pops inside of Rick's head, and it uttered words almost like telepathically inside of Rick's head. And he quotes, it says, "Leave now and never come back. Ever." He says the voice sounded evil. There was a pit in his stomach that just overtook him. He says he wanted to vomit, right? He grabbed Sally's hand and made it back to the boat. So I guess they're getting out of here, you guys. So now they're on this island. Again, for those just joining, Dogman Island Part 1. I'm doing Part 2 for those. A lot of people want to hear it again, especially the new folks. And so, yeah, so they come across apparently something on the island, and I'm guessing perhaps a dogman or something, right? He goes on to say later in the email. Now, I interviewed this guy on the phone several times, and he sent me several emails. So this whole story I pieced together for everybody. But later at night, Rick goes on to say that he still hears the howls from the tunnel within his house. He hears the howls from the island across the river. So he finally had to get with his neighbors. Now, on Groseal, these houses are kind of spaced apart, especially on East River Road, where they're $500,000 and $1 million homes. So they've got a lot of area between them. So he asks his one neighbor, "Do you hear those howls at night from out there in those islands and on my property?" And the neighbor looks at this guy and says, "What are you talking about? What howls?" He says, "The only thing that I hear is the chirping of birds and the rustling of the wind." Rick finishes that email, and that conversation I had with him is that's the thing that really scares him more than anything. So, really quickly for people coming in, the quick synopsis of this, and that was part 1. An affluent couple back in 1979, they're in their mid 20s, beautiful home. They hear howls coming from inside the hill that their home sat on. They hear howls back on the islands across the river. And then they investigate. They find the howls are emanating from inside the home in the tunnel, inside the wine cellar, excuse me. For whatever reason, he has the inclination to knock down the wall, travels the tunnel, finds bipedal prints that are of wolf or dog like, follows them. They lose oxygen supply. This tunnel is now running under the river, which is not uncommon back during the time period of these homes in Groseal, because there were a lot of founded tunnels used for bootlegging. So that was something that's a part of history for this guy. Then, of course, they went out. They proceeded to what I coined Dogman Island. This guy did. And I said, well, hell, I'm going to call this Dogman Island, as he and I kind of laughed about it, And then goes on here. He sees a pair of dogman, sees two two bipedal. Well, we saw the one for sure walk on two legs, come out, red eyes, gets the telepathic communication to turn around, never come back. And the other one, which was on four legs, disappeared in the woods. So I thought that was I thought that was a cool story. So what happened was I did a video on this. This is 2 years old. I did 2 years ago. I did this, and I put out the video on the exact same story I told you guys. And then, so Rick happens to see, he happens to see the video, gives me a call. Oh my God, yeah, thanks for doing that. And then he says, I'm going to give you the follow up or the part two because there's more that I want to tell you. I said, bring it on, my friend, bring it on. I will listen to it. So that was part one. I'm going to tell you part two here in just a moment, but I'm still under the weather. I need to grab a drink of water right quick. But before I do that, thank you to Keith, Nathan, Denise, Nathan again, and James for your awesome super chats. Love you guys. I appreciate you. I'm going to come back in give me about 90 seconds, get a quick drink of water, because I'm going to give you part two. So whatever you're doing, take a bathroom break, because part two is the follow-up to this is really cool. If you're new, please subscribe to Bigfoot Michigan Rob on YouTube. I'm about 50 away from 5,000. I will return briefly. Don't go nowhere. Don't go nowhere. Thanks so much. Give me a minute. I apologize, you guys. First of all, I don't know when I'm going to get rid of the scratchy voice and this nasally sound I've got. I've been sick, like I said. At the beginning of the show, I told you guys what's going on, and my mom, pneumonia, COVID. I had it. I got rid of it. You guys, I'm really getting frustrated, but I can't, I got to continue to do these shows. And so I do apologize for sounding, crappy, because I can tell I sound crappy. So I apologize. But I want to thank you all for coming on in. Excuse my coughing. I just want to get rid of this. I mean, I don't feel bad, you guys. I don't feel bad. It's just like, I don't know what it is. Hopefully, I get rid of this. But no excuses. The show goes on. So I love you all. Thanks for coming in. Appreciate you. Get that like button. I did these stories a couple of years ago, and people want to hear them again. First time I'm doing live, and I didn't do a show on Thursday because I had to get my mom from the hospital, so I had to cancel that one. So this is kind of a off-scripted show. I did a great show January 1st with Dave Scott. Go check that one out. Talked about his Flight 21 experience. It's fascinating. Paranormal and Bigfoot involved. Go check that out. I'm gonna get out with this part two of this for you guys. Thanks, little Patty. Thanks for everyone for coming in. Paradisal Fossils, Diane Boss, Nathan, Candy, Lil Patty, Val, hi Val, little Patty again. Mickey G, Duke Sullivan, hey Duke, Shade Viking, I Shade, hey Blue Doe, hi, how you doing, man? Thanks for coming on in, good to see you. A few other folks in here. I step away. I had 60 people in chat. I step away, got 52. You guys got to have more patience, more patience. That's okay. I'm glad to be here. Glad to see you all. Hope you're enjoying this. I'm going to give you guys part two now, kind of the follow up, and let's continue on. Oh boy, it says I'm muted. Thank you, Mike. I'm muted. I can't believe that. Well, I'm going back. What I was saying, everybody. What I was saying is I apologize for my crappy voice, my nasal. Am I not muted now? I just rolled off 5 minutes of talking here. Oh boy, Yeah, where's Krista? Where's the co-host when you need one? Well, I'm not going to rehash what I said other than thank you for everybody for coming in. Oh boy, I feel like a dork. Anyways, thanks for coming in. Um, so part two. So anyway, this is part two of this whole thing. Um, this guy says in a second, oh, Rob, by the way, my name is Rick. I forgot to tell you that in the beginning of the story. I don't know why. And of course, I remembered it, and so on and so forth. Yes, Shade Viking. Thank you to Shade Viking. I know. I'll start over. I think it was only a couple of minutes. I was muted. Thank you, you guys. I apologize. Again, apologize for my crappy voice here today. Still kind of sick. Here we go. Starting over again. Kind of. So this is part two. And thanks, Shade Viking, once again, man. Thanks to everybody. So this is Dogman Island Part 2 of the aftermath. So I received the email from Rick and Sally 10 days after the premiere of Dogman Island. As this guy quotes in the opening email, he says, "Rob, this is Rick. It's funny how we spoke on the phone and we never, I don't think I told you my name. Well, it's called Rick. I apologize for only mentioning my name. My wife's name is Sally. Okay. Blah, blah, blah. So I'm gonna skip through some of these things." And he goes on to say this. So here we go. Here we go. I got it back rolling. As you recall, the story took place in 1981 after their purchase of the home in 1979. And at the time, they were both 25 years old. He goes, today, 44 years later, they're the ripe old ages of 69. They still need to remain anonymous as their family holds prominent positions in the community of Grosseal. And I did kind of look up prominent people in Grosseal. I think I know who these people are. I'm certainly not going to divulge that, you guys. And so we'll move forward. He says they've had a most successful family business dating back to the 1940s. And their esteemed name. So this guy's full of himself. He's rich. I get it. You know, his esteemed name is still affluent and respected. He says breaking our silence publicly could, he fear, ruin their established name and business on the island. He wants to now finish with the story as he gives me part 2. Dogman Island, the aftermath. Thank you, everybody. So he goes on to start this by saying, you know, Rob, I noticed in the last video you did, many of your viewers asked, as I noticed in the comments, if we sealed off the tunnel. The answer is hell yes, we sealed it off as soon as we got back from the island. We were so disturbed at our encounter that we had to put the home up for sale a week later. Being that we are once again prominent to the island, we did, however, stay on Grosseal. After all, that's where our business is. But we just had to leave our original home. Yet at the same time, Sally and I knew that our investigation of these dogmen creatures needed to continue. 5 months later, we completed the sale of our home and purchased a newer, more modern home 3 miles up the coast that still had the view of what you, Rob, so eloquently coined as Dogman Island. Sally and my work is yet to be completed. We still needed answers. As a young and vibrant, adventurous couple, we continued on. Now, upon settling into their newer home 3 miles up the coast, as he says, we waited approximately 6 months before taking our trip back to Dogman Island. We carefully planned our trip, and I was able to entice a friend of ours who was an established hunter and tracker. We, for the purpose of the story, will simply call him Bob. Another man does not want to be made public. We explained to Bob what we had experienced. He is the only person in our circle of friends and family that we have told, with, of course, the exception of telling you, Rob. Bob's first reaction to our encounter was, as expected, one of sheer reluctance and skepticism. He asked us to repeat our story over and over again. Then he said, "Okay, Rick. Okay, Sally. I've known you both and the family for many years and do not believe you to be making up a good tall tale. I believe you." Bob went on to explain that he believes that such creatures do exist. He was a firm believer in Bigfoot and recalled the stories of bipedal-like creatures that roam the state of Michigan, bipedal dog-like creatures that roam Michigan. But the stories were not reported compared to Bigfoot stories. Now you have to remember that this is 1982, and the first reported Dogman sighting in Michigan was in 1987 in Wexford, Michigan. I, for one, do not know if that was the first reported Dogman sighting in Wexford, Michigan. I know there were several prior to that, but in 1987 in this state, it became popular. And I think that's also around the time of Linda Godfrey's releasing of the Beast of Bray Road. I do believe. Don't quote me on that. So he goes on to say that Bob was really ahead of his time when it came to this field of study. We were excited, though, that Bob believed this and that he knew about these monsters and gave us the confidence. We all needed to head back to the island. However, this time around, everybody, they did not plan to hike the island, but they planned to camp on Dogman Island. For however long it took to hunt down, capture, or even kill, as he says, this unknown phenomena. He goes on to say, you have to remember, we were all in our mid 20s and imagine being the first ones to discover some sort of unknown cryptid or monster, of which the word cryptid wasn't even in our vocabulary back during this time period. The day of the trip, it's 8 a.m. Much like our first trip to the island, we took our Sea Ray boat and anchored it 50 yards from the island. Myself, Sally, and Bob jumped on the 8-foot rubber skiff and motored onto the island beach. Bob was armed with a shotgun. I brought a hunting rifle, and Sally carried a .45 sidearm. We bought a tent just big enough for us all to sleep in. The tent was not very big, as I said, just enough for us to kick back and sleep, although sleep was not a priority. We were all out on a mission to find the Dogman, or in this case, Dogmen. Sally and I knew from our previous visit that there was more than one of these entities, these creatures. We set up camp, and around 11 a.m., we started into the woods. Like before, the island was overgrown with vegetation and overgrowth. We again had to hack and cut our way through before finally coming upon the trail that Sally and I first traveled. Not to our surprise, a deer ran across our path, still begging the question of how these deer were on this island from the first trip. Now, if you guys remember back what I told you earlier, they found a deer skull, and the question was how would a deer be on these islands? I'm not so sure. I know they swim. There are deer on Groseal because there's woods on Groseal. But again, this is something. Now they see an actual live living deer on the island. Further up the path, again, they stumble upon deer bones and several more deer skulls as they found the previous year. So they all now have, immediately they all have these uneasy feelings. Bob was amazed at these findings, especially for the size of the island, which again was only the size of 4 to 5 football fields in length, which I remember from the first time it was 3 football fields in length. They go out, they do their investigation, they're looking around you guys, they find no tracks, no prints, saw the deer bones, but that's it. They decide to head back to camp with only a day, an hour or so of daylight left. They pitched a fire and began to cook up some steaks that they brought from the home and planned to start to the other side of the island of daybreak, which they'd never had investigated before. Then it began as he goes on. The howls, those awful howls, those familiar howls that they heard from their original home. The same howls from their previous trip from the island, the howls from the cellar in their basement. Bob, who was with them, was amazed at these howls. He said he could not recognize the howls, and a fear overcame Bob. Then he says, "We're being watched." Sally and Rick, both in consort, proclaim the same sentiment to Bob. They too felt they're being watched. The howls grew closer and got louder. Then those familiar red eyes appeared from the depths of the tree line. Unlike the first encounter, these eyes were not at ground level by the 3 or 4 feet, but hovered 7 feet from the ground, and the glowing eyes were approaching and getting closer. There were now 3 sets of eyes. In the first trip, back maybe the previous year, they saw the 2 sets of glowing red eyes, and then they seen the dog man like creature emerge from the tree line. But now there's now 3 sets of glowing red eyes. They were very distinct and they were very much in focus. Rick reaches for his rifle with his sights set on one of the pair of the red eyes. He fires at these eyes. He goes on to explain that an almost paralyzing and a much louder howl, more like a scream, shook the woods. He goes on to say, though, the set of eyes that he fired at disappeared. He then realizes he made a mistake. He now is in fear for his life, he says. The 2 sets of remaining eyes rapidly emerged from the tree line and now took on the shape of 2 huge wolves, bipedal, charging and growling. Guy fires at this set of eyes, not seeing any animals. All of a sudden, boom, all hell breaks loose. And now 2 huge wolves, bipedal, are charging these guys, the 3 of them. Bob, Sally, Rick. Bob joins in with his shotgun, Sally with the 45, and him with his rifle. They unloaded. They all began firing at these beasts, yet the beasts kept coming and would not slow down. They reached within, as they say, 10 feet of them, ferocious red eyes ablaze. Then in an instant, these dogmen, these creatures, whatever, seemed to evaporate like steam. So now you guys, you got to listen back. Sally with the 45, one of the dudes with a shotgun, the other dude with a rifle. They dispersed all the rounds at these dogmen, bipedally charging them, running at them, and they're firing, they're unloading. They're not slowing down, not stopping them. They don't fall down. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, they disappear into steam, according to what I've been told, right? The howl stopped as well. But in replacement of the howls was a clear and distinctive human voice that retorts. It says, "Leave while you can." Much like the telepathic voice that was heard not a year ago. Again, it says, "Leave while you still can." Very similar to what was said the prior year, hence telepathically. He goes on to say this was not telepathic. All 3 of them, Sally, Bob, and Rick, heard the message. The voice was audible to everybody. Needless to say, as they go on to say, we all immediately left the island, dispersed, got to the skiff, got off to the sea ray 50 yards away on the island. And he says he never returned again. Rick goes on to tell me this will be his final communication. He goes on to say he thinks there's something evil about this island. He says, still to this day, Sally and he can hear those distinctive howls each and every night. And much like the previous encounter or the previous residents, they've asked the neighbors, do you hear those howls? And they look at them like, we hear no howls. We do not know what you're talking about. He says it's almost like these creatures, their presence, their sounds, the howls can only be heard by them for whatever the reason, which to this day haunts him. He goes on to say he's not moving from his home. He's got his business. He thinks if his life would have been threatened, it would have been killed at least twice on all the occasions he's had these experiences. But he cannot figure out why. He doesn't say tormented you guys, but he doesn't know why he and the wife are the only people, and now Bob, of course, the tracker, experiences. And that's what he can't figure out. He goes on to say he thinks that the waters out Groseville area are in fact evil. So I'm very familiar with these islands, you guys. I believe something happened. These guys, there are tunnels that are associated with homes in Groseville. There are cryptids that I've heard other accounts of cryptids being actually on Groseville. I've driven by, which I think might be Dogman Island before when I was younger, and there's no way you can get on it. I've had this remote investigated, and people had suggested that this was an island where lab experiments took place. I do not know that I believe in all of that, okay? I just know what this guy told me verbally and through an email, and I spoke with this guy. But I do know this. BMR is going to Dogman Island. I've been trying to get something together to get over. There's a couple people that are going to go with me. You guys know who they are. I think Tex might be one of them. I think that Monica wants to come. A bunch of us want to go over there. I'm going over there. It's just, you got to get a charter boat captain because I don't have a boat no more. And I don't have any friends that have a boat. So it could be probably expensive. And if I go, you guys, I want to make sure that, we have our ducks all in a row because it's close by. It's 40-minute ride, and then it's probably another 40 minutes to get out there by boat. So I'm interested in that. I have to apologize for being muted for about 3 or 4 minutes. When you do these by yourself, I didn't realize I had it on mute, but I apologize for that and anybody listening. I want to thank everybody for coming on in today. I want to thank the people that Keith, Nathan, Denise, Nathan, James, Mike, Shade Viking for your support with your super chats. I appreciate it ever so much. Help me get to 5,000 subs, you guys. I know most of you here are subscribed, but put out the good word. If you're new, please subscribe, of course. Hit that like button on your way out. You guys all know about the conference coming up pretty soon. It's January 19th and 20th. Today being Friday, the Blondes and Booze are on tonight. Or wait, what is today? Yeah, today's Friday. Yep. I'll be back midnight with Krista, Brandy, and Monica Saturday night at midnight for a cool show we're going to put on for you guys. I appreciate everybody for coming in. Thanks for putting up with my voice, my illness, whatever I got going on. I don't know what it is. I'm alive. Duke Sullivan, dog horrific. If I didn't say hi to you guys, obviously I couldn't because I wasn't paying attention to chat. So thank you to each and every single one of you. Thanks for showing the support, the love. Happy New Year. Happy New Year. Check out my show I did Thursday with Dave Scott, Flight 21. That was pretty cool. Never heard it before. Dave shared that with me, which was very nice. As I'm just muddling around now to find the extra button. See you guys all later. Appreciate it. Love you. Like it on the way out. I am BMR.
Are you ready?